Hey everyone, I'm Rakesh. As he introduced, I'm a Director of Product Management at AMD. I've spent close to 14 years in the hardware industry or semiconductor industry, worked for different companies, worked on different products, smartphones. We were in the thick of it when the smartphones became a thing in 2008. We were powering, our team developed the chipset which powered the first Android smartphone. Then I worked in data centers, and different market segments in terms of IoTs, smartwatches for kids. Right now I'm focused on PCs and desktops. Fun fact, I was telling everybody that in my previous role, I was focused on smartwatch for kids, right? How do we make kids more active? How do we get them out in the field so that they can play tag, they have smartwatches, make it fun? I've taken a quick career pivot to started working on gaming PCs, how to get them back and start gaming on their PCs in the notebooks. So the thing I like about my job is most of the times we are building hardware and thinking about use cases 2 to 3 years from now. What are the things that can excite the user 3 years from now? How does your smartphone look like 3 years from now? That's exciting and frustrating most of the times because most of the times we don't know. And another part of the job or the industry is the visibility, right? Most of you have, all of you have smartphones. Some of you might have Android smartphones. How many of you know how many cameras are there on your phone? Anybody? Okay, I see 1 or 2 brave souls, right? But if I asked you, do you know the name of the processor which is there in your smartphone? 0, right? That's the thing. Most of the people, it's not visible on what hardware it runs, and that's probably the beauty of these products, right? They want to be behind-the-scenes heroes powering some of these great experiences. So in my talk, that's what I'll be focused on. I'll be focused on, as a product manager, when you're delivering a key cog of the wheel, which is empowering that these user experiences in the devices that you don't control, what are some of the tools and the mindset that you need to approach to make it successful? Because I'm a hardware engineer and I'm in the semiconductor industry by training, most of the examples that you'll see flashed up is going to be some of those hardware devices. But the talk will focus on what's the approach that you can take when you, as a product manager, are delivering some key components into a bigger system, into a bigger product, which can impact your users and change users' life. Okay, with that said, I'm going to be focusing on AI hardware products. AI is a big thing, right? So let's talk about what do I mean by AI hardware products or hardware devices. Anything that you can touch, that you can feel, you can keep it in your pocket, throw it away when you don't need it. I take it as a hardware devices. It's not like your ChatGPT where you can't throw it away. You're just hooked onto it. It's a software. You're doing stuff with it. That's a different story, right? And what does AI devices mean? Any devices or any hardware product which can take some inputs, do some quick math on it, and give you and react accordingly, right? Those are, in the definition here, AI hardware products. And they come in all different shapes and sizes, right? Different t-shirt sizes. The first one is small, right? Again, these are small devices you usually carry around. They have limited inputs. They can listen to you, they can take a text-based input, and they can do a specific task or a specific stuff. A good example is a tracker. I'm assuming some of you might know Tile. It's a tracker. It's built with a specific purpose. It's supposed to track a device which it is attached to, right? So as a product manager, when you're managing this device, the good thing is you have an extreme focus. You have a hero use case. You want this device to be thin and light. You want it to do a pretty darn good job of detecting the stuff it's attached to. That's a good thing. So the bad thing, or a challenging stuff when you're a product manager for this device, it's extremely focused. It's easy when you don't deliver on a required user experience for the user to get mad with it and not use it again, right? You might see a similar experience, like if you're running a restaurant, or when you're trying to put out a trial for your software product, which is very new, you get very limited chance The first experience that you have with the user is going to be very important. If we mess it up, the probability of the user coming back and using your product drastically reduces. So the strategy people employ here is, how do you create stickiness, right? So that user becomes a little bit more forgiving when the product messes up. The second set of devices that I have up here is medium t-shirt size. These are the kind of devices which are a little bit more intelligent. Think about your tablets, think about your laptops, or the VR headset devices few people are crazy about these days. They have more inputs, right? They have sensors, they have keyboards, they have a display on which they can see and sense the world. They have more intelligence built into them, and they can give you more intelligent output, right? The challenges of the high-level challenges of managing such a devices is the user experience can be broken at different levels because there are a lot of different technologies coming together. So the focus here would be, how do you deliver a consistent user experiences when there are different technology pieces at play? And in my talk, I'm going to be double-clicking on the second piece here, but just to complete the t-shirt sizing here, you need to talk about large. Think of these devices as a conglomeration or accumulation of a lot of medium-sized devices. The best example is the Tesla, right? In Tesla, you have an amazing entertainment system, which is an AI product in itself, right? You can touch it, you can show you movies, now you can even game in Tesla. At the same time, it's powered with this crazy amount of cameras, which is sensing everything which is happening around it and reacting accordingly, right? So these can be thought about as a different medium-sized product, making a big product in the end, right? So as a product manager, when you're managing such a big product, getting incremental user experience benefits by managing these medium products is the key. But at the same time, big mega features, like when you want to go from L2 level of driving to L5, that's going to take some time. So you need to be focused on the incremental steps in delivering the right user experience to get to the bigger stuff. And quick example is, if in the software world, if we are launching a market space, right? It's a conglomeration of different technologies getting into the market space. How do you manage that versus managing a smaller piece of technology? So the next, I want to double click on what I called as a medium-sized devices. The example that I have here is Apple AirPod, HomePod they call it, right? There are typically two kind of development strategies when it comes to hardware on how these things are put together, right? The first one is what I'm calling here is vertically integrated. The best example is Apple, right? Apple has a good stronghold, I should say, on everything that goes into these devices, be it software, be it the form factor and the different components down to the chip level, right? If the product manager, let's say I'm the product manager of this HomePod device, there is a specific user experience I'm working on. What is that? Hey, when I move this HomePod from one place to another, the connectivity, the switch has to be seamless, right? So given that use case, it is a little bit more easy, I should say, on how you drill that user focus across the different layers, right? Apple does its own software, right? So the product manager driving specific features into the software is a little bit more easier. Apple has a very strong hold in terms of the different component it sources, right? And last but not the least, which is where I'm more focused on, is the chips, right? They can develop a custom hardware to deliver the right experience. And that's the reason why we have a lot of Apple fanboys who swear by a good user experience that it delivers, right? And what's the cons of it, right? Not everybody can afford it. It is a huge, costly affair when you want to control the whole supply chain. It's not easy. And the other stiff part is it's not very flexible, right? If you're owning the whole supply chain, you cannot move faster like how a competition would when you want to add a new feature, when you want to add a new component. So it's trifling in terms of flexibility, but they managed to overcome that by delivering a very compelling user experience. More non-hardware example for this is Netflix, right? So the Netflix now is in Netflix or even Amazon Studios are investing very heavily into producing their own shows. It's a costly affair, but they have a huge amount of data analytics coming in, telling what the users want, what the users like, producing their own show, and building more stickiness and loyalty. On the other side, which is where the most of the humble world is, what I call here is horizontal development, right? Let's think about the same smart speaker if it were to be developed by another company like Bose, right? Great company, it has a great technology, right? But it might have to depend on, I don't know, like an Android software. So if they want to deliver the same experience where the connectivity is seamless when this Bose speaker is moved from place A to place B, the product manager has a good control about how the feature should look, but the interaction with trying to work with the operating system, getting the feature in is not easy, right? And yeah, they might have a good hold on sourcing the different components, not to the same Apple level, but when you come down to the hardware or the chips providing it, they don't do their own chips, which means that they cannot customize and deliver the same user experience like a vertical integrated company like Apple can. And from a bottoms-up view, which is where I live, from a chips perspective, right? These are hardware products which are built well ahead of the product is conceived. When I get a request for, hey, can you customize and build a chip for a specific market, we are not aligned in terms of vision, we're not aligned in terms of the business value it brings in, right? So the next question is, when you are living in this space, when we are, as a product managers, delivering a key piece of technology that goes into a broader system that we don't control, what are some of the things that we should be focused on to make a bigger impact? Oops, try again. All right, so I'm going to be taking a double click on the horizontal development, primarily from a chip space, because that's what we produce, that's what's my expertise in. What are some of the key challenges when the chip that I'm going to be producing makes a wider impact? The first one is the timeline, right? Most of the times, these chips have a big development cycle. Typically takes a year or two to develop. It's a timeline. I'm working on something which is 2 to 3 years ahead, whereas my customers are heads down focused on delivering something in 2023, right? I want to think about how does your smartphone look like in 3 years? How does your smart glasses look like in 3 years? What are the features I need to be putting in? Whereas my customers are heads down into delivering something they want to do now. So there is a timeline challenge, right? The second one is the ownership, right? As I mentioned before, you can have a very good piece of software, a very good hardware component that your product managed and designed, but most of the time, that is where your boundaries end. The device, the bigger system, is ultimately controlled by your customers. How do we break through those ownership barriers so that you're delivering a compelling user experience? That's the second challenge. And the third thing is end user focus, right? In all this race about technology coming from A company, B company, you saw the stack, right? The end user is lost in sight. So how do we make sure that even when we are pulling technologies from these different disparate companies, we maintain a strong user focus is going to be the third challenge. So I'm going to talk about each of those challenges one by one. I'm going to double click on them. The first one is the timeline piece that I talked about, right? How, as a product manager, when you're building a product that's going to come in the future, you're trying to chase those hero use cases that you think the users will care about in 2 years is a big challenge. How do you ensure that it's not just a fad, that it's going to come and go, because you need to make that investment now? How do you go about doing that? So let's take an example here. I call it a case study as an example. Let's say I'm a product manager, and I'm tasked with building a chip which is going to power our smartwatches in 2025, right? So the first thing is visualizing how the smartwatches are going to look in 2025. It's not a one person's job. The first thing, the 3 different techniques that I usually employ is, the first one is the team, right? How do we assemble a team with a different background and unlock them to get more ideas out on the table, right? Hey, you get engineering team, you get your UX team, you get your research team, right? You have a problem in place. Unlock them saying that, hey, don't worry about budget, that's going to hunt you later. Let's talk about what are the different use cases, right? So you get a list of use cases, then you talk about how are these use cases actually improving the core value proposition of the product, which is a smartphone in this case. The third piece is, does all these use cases has to be done on our product, or can it be ventured somewhere else, right? These are the 3 key questions that I usually try to get answered. Putting that into perspective for a smartwatch, right? How do we think a smartwatch in the future can look like? I asked this question to my team. The answers were crazy, right? Oh, it should be a bracelet. It should be a bracelet with, screens surrounding it. It doesn't even have to be a smartwatch. It can be a button on your shirt, which is projecting something on your screen, right? So you get all of these different innovative ideas from your teams internally, from your customers. Then you need to ground that to the basics. How is it improving the core value proposition of your product? Why do people even wear a smartwatch, right? What are our customer personas? For example, if the smartwatch is being sold for a fashion customer, they care about how it looks. What are the different wallpapers I get? How is it going in, with everything that I'm wearing? That's what that user cares. If you're selling a smartwatch to your health user, right, they care a lot about different kind of health analytics that they can get. And if you're selling it to a productive user, they care about how can smartwatch make me more productive in a day. But there is a common theme. All these personas wants to interact with your smartwatch very easily. They don't want to lift up the hand and talk to it, press buttons. Anything that you can make to make the interaction with your smartwatch more easier is a slam dunk, right? So the dreamy use cases, if you have, most of the people are familiar with ChatGPT, right? If you're able to have a ChatGPT like an assistant running on your smartwatch, you can just talk to it. It can talk back to you. It can give you your vital signs. No need of lifting your hands. It makes the whole interactions more easier, right? Fine, great idea. But what does that mean? Does the chip have to be spec big enough to run the whole thing? Can it be running on cloud? Is the next question. So even when we align and arrive at these hero use cases, we can't just put that in front of an engineering team. You need to be able to digest that and put clear specs, clear KPIs, which is a big challenge. Think about it. We are speccing a product. We are speccing a use case which comes 3 years from now. You want your engineering team to build it, start building it now, and you as a product manager need to spec it to the T. And the further complications in hardware, it's not like software that you can fix and release it every 1 month. The prod life cycle is 2 years. If I tell my engineering team to build a compute with X amount of capacity, I cannot go back 6 months from now and tell them to change it. The life cycle is 12 to 16 months. So converting these hero use cases into KPIs is a challenge, right? And how do we usually approach that challenge? Is you get more feedback. You talk to your customers on what they care about, right? You talk and do more, reach out to more research communities, helping you convert some of those dreamy use cases into strong KPIs. So, okay, you spec the future, great job. You have your engineering team off there building the KPIs. But how do we get through the ownership barrier, right? Usually, I can't wait for the hardware product to show up and then starting engaging with our customers and say, hey, I have my chip that you asked about here in 2025 January. Let's go and build a smartwatch which goes to market in 2025 April. That's not going to happen. So as a product manager who's building the key component in the entire system, we need to not just visualize the feature, we should be able to demonstrate the feature to the different parties, right? Let's take the smartwatch example that I told you, right? So for the people not in the hardware industry, I'll give you a quick primer on what does it take. What are the different players involved when somebody needs to put a smartwatch together? Usually, you have companies like us who builds the chip. Then you have something like device manufacturers in an Asian country like China who's building the devices. Then you have companies like Apple, Fossil, Garmin who are actually putting the IDs. Then you have software vendors who are putting the applications together. So if me, as a provider of a chip, wants to demonstrate the feature, these are the different entities I need to be partnering with to demonstrate the future. So driving partnerships, when you are building a small component which goes in the entire system, is extremely key, right? And partnering with, especially when you're speccing and trying to demonstrate the future, looking beyond, looking at the fringes in terms of startups, what are they doing, leveraging their ideas, and driving these partnerships to build the demos is actually very key, right? Even when I talk about, hey, ChatGPT running on your watch, it's not very enticing for a VP who is sitting up in one of my customers to get excited. It's all talk. But if I'm able to present a working prototype with him, it might look a tad ugly, but if I'm able to present that working prototype with him and say, hey, this is the capability, you see it right in front of you, let's build something together in 2025. The conversation is entirely different than just the slideware and the spec. And that becomes key, right? When you put something in front of people that they can see, aligning on a common vision becomes extremely important. And the last piece, then I'm going to lay this to rest, is you have spec'd the future, right? You have tried to come out of your product horizon and you've tried to build a working prototype, trying to build different parties together, but it's extremely important to keep the end user focus in mind, right? One of the primary reasons that people love Apple is they feel that the experience is consistent. They know that the entire product has been put together by a single company with a singular vision, right? They can relate to company's vision and they buy the product. At the same time, when you buy, let's say, Windows PCs, right? I deliver Windows PCs. Not many people are extremely thrilled about it because that's a technology which is put together and visible to the user, right? When you're using your PC, when it gets hot, right? And when the fan starts blowing and you're not pleased with it, that's because not a consistent experience has been put together by different companies because there are different motivations with these different technology providers. So how should we be thinking about things that we can do as a product owner for a small component that can deliver a consistent user experience? Again, going through the different layers that I had, what are the spheres of influence that we can do, right? So demonstrating the future in terms of an MVP becomes extremely key so that we can drive focus to at the software layer, right? The software can be delivered by multiple companies. It can be Microsoft, it can be Google, right? Different companies. Getting focused on what is that hero experience that we are delivering and driving crisp requirements and KPIs to the software is the key, right? And more specifically to the hardware devices, how do they look? What are the different form factors becomes extremely important. You don't want to wear a watch which is bulkier just because it has a ChatGPT on you. Nobody would buy it. Nobody would wear it, right? So the extreme focus on how the device looks is going to be important. Because you have built a demo and demonstrated before, you can use that to prime the whole supply chain in terms of what are the things that needs to be aware of, what are the technologies, the screen technologies that need to be invested in before. And you're driving standards bottom up, right? From the software providers, like, we have APIs, right? Making the end users start using these APIs into the entire supply chain, kinds of build a standard templates. And you need to provide easy to use tools so that it becomes easy for the entire value chain to use your products. So when all of these layer together is an attempt that we continuously keep making at a company like ours, which delivers a critical component to deliver a consistent user experience. And that wraps it up. All right. Sure.
So I use, at the bank, I know they use the silicon chips for debit and card processing. So there are so many things where the chips are used. Who drives the use cases? Like being in the financial and payment sector, we drive the use cases, and because this is how a contact list should work like. But I think you're saying the chip companies drive the use cases thinking about the future. So is it, how do you get the use cases?
Yeah, I think as a product managers, that's a constant question I get in the chip company, right? Who are driving the use cases, right? In some cases, there are established players, like if you're talking about a smartphone industry and stuff, there are Samsungs of the world who actually drive the use cases. The role of a product manager there is augmenting those use cases with incremental stuff and what we want to do in the future. But at the same time, there are areas which have not been done before. For example, I was trying to, I gave you an example of a smartwatch company, Disney, right? I was trying to work with Disney who wanted to make a smartwatch for kids, but they had zero experience about the devices. All they knew is the magical experience that they want the kids to have. They want to have a watch when they come to the Disney park. There are fun things that they can do. There, the role of the product manager for me was, I was their hardware product manager. I defined in terms of how the devices should look like, what components they need to put in. I was more front, being the product manager, defining how the devices looked, whereas the experience came from the company. So it varies in terms of the market maturity and what kind of the target products we're looking at. Okay, so what are the common problems you've seen companies run into when adapting AI for hardware? Yeah, so the first, most of the companies, they want to do AI. They don't understand what an AI is, but they want to do an AI, right? The first disambiguation is, what is the user experience they want to deliver? And the second piece is, where does it needs to occur? Does it need to occur in the cloud? Does it need to occur in the edge? Once we decipher that, once the use case is bound, which is where the companies struggle, and what are their requirements in terms of the hardware compute, that's where companies run into trouble, either by underinvesting or overinvesting. And second, given the fact this is such a changing field, not just from a use case perspective, even at a hardware layer, it's very difficult to pin down on what is the right hardware, what's the right hardware architecture for me to employ. What is the largest misconception you've seen people have about hardware product management? The first misconception is people don't know that exist, right? People think that, hey, it's just software that's eating the world, whereas I would say it's chips and semiconductors that's eating the world, right? And hardware product, it all depends upon the end user experience, right? Whether the product management comes from hardware or software, it doesn't matter. And can they coexist? How can they coexist is probably the common misconception, where we have software product managers who want to do all. How much time do I have?
You got a couple questions.
Okay. What are the common problems you've seen companies, okay, we got that. As an edge computing and AI continue to evolve, how will it impact the hardware in the future? Yeah, again, going back to the big use cases that have come in front of us since December. One is ChatGPT, The other one is the Stable Diffusion. If you guys have heard about it, it's about, hey, it converts, does an awesome job of generating pictures that you might have not seen before from the text, right? Everybody is going gaga over it, right? What does that mean for edge compute? How big? Again, there's a constraint when it comes to your smartphones and your smartwatches. It cannot grow bigger, but at the same time, they need to be powering these really intelligent experiences. So the challenge is going to be, how can the hardware become more intelligent? Can it keep pace with this enraging use case? That's going to be a key challenge. In your smartwatch example with the 2-year runway to build, at what point in the journey your team began looking at the requirements for the next watch? Yeah, I mean, my engineering team always wants the requirements now. When I tell them that I want your chips to be built in 25, they want requirements at least 2 years from now. We talk about agile methodology, waterfall methodology. Hardware, unfortunately, is in that typical waterfall methodology where the requirements needs to be locked down. Then there is a given amount of development cycle. So the requirement needs to be locked down pretty soon in the development cycle, and the leeway of how much we can change starts getting really smaller and smaller. How do you deal with ethics around the use of AI broadly? A very good question, right? So, this is a question which keeps coming up, especially when we are talking about, when I go to my customers, talking about the future use cases that we need to be building. What are the guardrails? What is ethical AI? That's probably a question that gets asked a lot. It rests a lot in terms of the software providers, the big software providers of the world who have wealth of this data set to ensure or to make good strides on the ethical use of it. At a hardware level, there isn't much of an influence that I could place in terms of an ethical use of a use case, but how is the data set generated? How do we work to remove biases in those data sets? Because we're going to be engaging heavily. ChatGPT, in whatever form, is going to become the next Google. It's going to start influencing the way we think about problems. And how do we ensure that it's not trained on a data set which is biased, right? Sometimes it's not going to be visible. That's going to be a real challenge, not as much of a hardware challenge, but of software and a usage challenge. How does rapid AI advancements pressure your product development and timelines? Oh, great question. This is a constant pressure or a big pain point, because as I said, there is a lead time to lock the hardware, but when you look at these different AI use cases and models, there are research papers published every day like there is no tomorrow, right? Like ChatGPT, nobody knew it existed 6 months ago. Now every customer I talk to want it, right? Do we have the hardware to even run some of those models? Absolutely not. Will we have a hardware to run those models in 1 year? Maybe. But how do we live and how do we make that work in the given hardware that we have is an immense amount of pressure when use cases are developing more rapidly, when the development cycle is more slower. Right. Can you give examples of some failures where future predictions did not come true and product couldn't meet the user needs? I have a lot of them, but I'll pick one. So the smartwatch example for kids that I was going to tell you guys. So there was this, we were in a focus group in China. The smartwatch for kids is a real thing. It's not just seen as a device, it's seen as a security device because parents want to feel safer when the kids wear their smartwatches and, they want to track them where they're going and stuff. There was this big focus group where said, hey, we need to put 3 cameras on a smartwatch because the parents want to know not just what is happening to the kids, they want to know everything around. I was a parent, I got really emotional. Yes, you need 2 to 3 cameras in a smartwatch. We spent 6 months specking what it looked like, tried to do a lot of prototypes and figured out there's no way I can put 2 cameras without bulking up the smartwatch to be like 200, 300 grams where the kid will never wear it, right? So it was like a 6 months of an effort, good learning, but obviously not many smartwatches now have 2 cameras. All right.
All right. Thank you so much, Rakesh. Can we give him a hand? That was awesome.